Welcome back everyone to yet another session. So in this session we will be dealing about effective communication. In the previous session we have just touched upon the components of effective communication, but here we will be learning in detail about it. Fine. So here you have to understand the breadth and depth of the effective communication. We have to explore each and every forms. Okay, so how this effective communication is important in a day-to-day basis, also in an educational setting. We have to know the different forms of communication, and also the collaboration of these different forms of communication that create an important effect on our being. Okay, fine. So first one is verbal communication. We have mentioned about the clarity and coherence of all the communication, right, aspects of communication. But here, in when the verbal communication comes into play, we have to learn about the elements of verbal communication. That is the clarity. It depends on the choice of words, the words we use, and the sentence structure, and also the ability to articulate the sentence without any problem. Okay, so clarity or clear communication, clear sentences which avoids misunderstanding, which will avoid the misunderstanding, and also it will be helpful in ensuring the message is understood as the person had intended. Okay, so it eradicates a misunderstanding and we can make sure the receiver understood what we are trying to convey. Okay, that is the clarity. Then coming to the tone and pacing, we'll deal in detail about it, but before going into that, we have to learn about different forms of communication. We already know about the verbal, non-verbal, visual and written communication, right? But here we will be learning a little bit more about the intercultural group and classroom communication. Okay, so I've already mentioned about the verbal communication, the elements of verbal communication. Clarity, I've mentioned about the choice of words and the structure of sentences, which will help in avoiding the misunderstanding, and it will ensure the message is directly understood by the person who receives the information as the sender had intended. Okay, so the clarity should be there in the sender's mind. Okay, so this, in this image you can see the first one is, if we take the petals as thoughts, it is disorganized in the first person, right? Second person, that is the sender itself. If the thoughts are organized properly, then we have an image, then we have a clear image which we can convey to the sender. That is why when the image has to be, the clarity not only means in the choice of words. So to create the choice of proper words, we have to have clarity in understanding also. Okay, so that is about the verbal communication clarity. Now the tone. So we have to remember the tone can significantly affect, okay, significantly affect how the message is received. So there are certain types, that is positive tones and negative tones. For example, if the for example, in a educational setup, if the lecturer is being rude, so rude is a tone. Okay, rudeness or bossiness or annoyedness or angry tone, that is actually negative tones. Okay, all the frightened, worried, grave, desperate, bossy, then dark, okay, annoyed, so all those things are negative tones. Okay, so when the tone is negative, usually what happens, the communication is not engaging, it's not inviting, it will put off the person who is listening to them. But if the tone is positive, if the tone is calm and approving, tender, or else if it is cheerful, lively, that invites the receiver to listen carefully. Okay, and that will make the communication more engaging and inviting. Remember, there are positive tones and negative tones. Negative tones will not help, it will create what, it will create resistance from the side of the receiver, and also discomfort to the person who receives the message. But if it is a positive tone, it makes the communication conversation more engaging and more inviting. So that is why the tone is important to make the verbal communication effective. Next important point of verbal communication is the pacing and pausing. Okay, pacing and pausing is actually the speed at which at which the person speaks, that can influence the comprehension of the listener, right? So here we have to remember, for example, if a sentence, it is photosynthesis is how plants make their food, right? Photosynthesis is how plants make their food, they take in sunlight. So this single sentence can be molded in different ways if the tone is different or if the pacing is entirely different, right? So, photosynthesis is how the plants make their food. Photosynthesis is how plants make their food. Photosynthesis is how plants make their food. Photosynthesis is how plants make their food. So these, the way I spoke in different five or six forms. So these is actually pacing of the sentence. So in the first sentence I gave pause after photosynthesis. In the second sentence I gave pause after how. So thereby the even in different contexts the sentence can change its own meaning and also comprehension. Okay, so we can adjust the tone and adjust the speed in which we speak so that the students or the listener can absorb the information properly. Okay, so the strategic pausing can emphasize important points. So whenever we are taking a class we have to highlight certain important points, right? So that is done in verbal communication. If we don't have a highlighter on or a chalkboard and we are using only the form of speech as a method of giving information, so here we can use the pausing and pacing as a method of emphasizing the important points, and that will give the listener time to process the information. If you are giving adequate pauses in between sentences, that will help the listener to process the previous information. This process will help the person to process the previous information. Okay, so that is why pacing and pausing is also important to create an effective verbal communication. Fine. So this tone modulation, there is something called as tone modulation. That is where the pause, the pace, also the pitch and power comes into play. Okay, so there are four P's of tone modulation: pitch, pause, power and pace. Just remember that. Okay, next coming into non-verbal communication. Already mentioned in the previous classes about facial expression, body language, eye contact and gestures and how that play into the non-verbal communication. Fine. So any form of communication that conveys message without using words, that is called as nonverbal communication. So nonverbal cues can be via facial expression. When we are sad, our lips will turn downwards, or when we are happy, the corner of lips will be turned upwards and the eyes become smaller, right? Eyes will little bit squint. So that is actually a form of verbal communication to convey that we are feeling sad or happy. Fine. Facial expressions play into mind that here. Okay, next is body language. Body language is actually the way a person sits, stands or moves. Like, it will communicate confidence, right? In, for example, if a person is going for a job interview and they are slouching, that is actually a sign of underconfidence. If they are sitting straight with an open body language like uncrossed arms, if a person is sitting with crossed arms, it is meaning they are not relaxed. The arms should be open and the posture should be relaxed. That is called as open body language that emanates confidence, right? Openness to receive the information. So that is how body language plays into non-verbal communication. Fine. Next is eye contact. Maintenance of eye contact is that will signal interest. Okay, interest and attentiveness. If a person is avoiding eye contact, that is actually either disinterest or discomfort or even lying, right? So that is a form of nonverbal communication that will actually give a little bit clue or cue into what the person is feeling. Okay, facial expression can reveal the true feelings. Okay, if a person is frowning while speaking to you, that means they're annoyed with you. If the person is sitting and slouching, that means they're underconfident. If the person is not maintaining eye contact, that means they might be having some kind of discomfort with us, right? Next is gestures. Gestures is actually when um, it can be used to emphasize some points, it can be used to express certain emotions, and you have to remember, in case of gestures, that can mean different in different settings, right? It can mean different in different settings, like cultural differences in gestures, like head nodding, head bobbing. So this head bobbing nature is actually present in Indians or South Asians mostly. It is not present in the westerners. So they might not understand what, if they're asking us something and we are just nodding our head, that doesn't mean that they won't understand that what we are trying to say, if we are agreeing to them or we are disagreeing to them. We have to tell them. Okay, so thereby the cultural differences matter in case of gestures. And also you have to understand this helps in engagement. Okay, gestures can mean can indicate the direction in which we are trying to emphasize the message. Okay, for example, we are telling the person to go right, we will show it from our side. We'll lift our right hand and show it is this side. So instead of telling right, we will show our right hand, so that is known that it is to, yeah, it is to make the person understand about the direction. So remember, gestures, cultural differences is important when we speak about gestures. Next is intercultural communication. Intercultural communication is actually information between individuals from different cultural background. Okay, so here we have to understand about cultural diversity. So if a pan Indian conference is going on, there might be people coming from South India, there might be people coming from Northeast or North or West or East side of India, right? So from here, there we have culturally diverse, right? India's culturally diverse, so we have to understand and also we have to be aware of the barriers because of our differences in language, customs, culture, values and communication styles. Okay, so here we have to understand this cultural sensitivity, language barriers and contextual understanding. Fine. So here first I'll just mention a little bit about each of them. So cultural sensitivity, we have to understand and respect cultural differences, which is very much crucial. If we do not respect the cultural differences, we will never gain their respect. Give respect and take respect, right? If we do not respect their culture, they won't be respecting us or our culture, thereby that will create a barrier in learning about each other or even communicating with each other. They won't be interested in whatever we are saying if we are not respecting them, right? So similarly, there is where the cultural sensitivity comes into play. Okay, we have to be sensitive about their culture, about if it is from different religious background, we have to be very much aware of the differences between our religions or upbringings. Okay, all those things will be helpful in understanding the communication norms. And also here we have to use silence, indirect language on non-verbal cues. Okay, that is where these things come into play. We have to be aware and respect the cultural differences. And also, how will we be aware? By using silence. If we are not understanding what they are saying or if we are not agreeing to what they are saying, we can just be silent. We do not have to go and oppose them. Instead, we can just remain silent. And even we can even use indirect language on non-verbal cues. Like we are not, we can just, if they are trying to say something and we do not know what to say as a reply, we can just nod our head. Okay, or nod our head, or just um, give a head nod to understand or to make them understand we understood what they're trying to speak. Okay, so we have to understand and respect the differences. That is the first important point in intercultural communication. Next is language barriers. So here we have to understand the context of these cultures. There are high context cultures and low context cultures, right? So these high context cultures are actually Asian cultures, where the face value is important. Like you might have heard about the term saving face or losing face. Just like losing face is like losing respect. The community is more important than the person. That is mainly happening in the East Asian countries. Okay, mainly in the Chinese, Japanese, even the Arab countries, even in the African countries. They are called as high context cultures, where there is more importance to the society, and even their language is context based. Even though they are using the same words, but in different contexts the words mean different. That is one thing you have to remember. Even if we have a broken Chinese knowledge, or we have a broken Japanese knowledge, we have to understand there are same words for different context. So context is mainly mattering in the high context cultures, while in the low context cultures, like people who are more explicit in their conversation. Okay, so here, So here we have to understand, in Swiss cultures or even American cultures, they mean what they speak. Okay, and there are different words or different terms used for different context. Okay, same word is not used in different context. Okay, that is called as low context cultures. That is Swiss, German, Scandinavian, American, usually European countries. Okay, European countries are more of low context cultures, and Asian countries, even African countries, even the South American countries are higher context. Even India is considered to have a high context culture. Okay, so we have to simplify this language for clarity, right? So language barrier is a major one we will face when we're speaking about intercultural communication. So to abolish or to understand about the language, we have to understand the language barriers we face. So here we have to understand about these two kinds of culture differences, and also we have to avoid using idioms, or yeah, the Indian English is different from American or European English. So certain words, for example, brinjal is an Indian word, it is not an American or an even European word. Lady's finger, it is an Indian word. Okay, and it is not used usually in other English speaking countries. So we have to be careful if you're trying to communicate about certain things. We have to understand that things mean different. Okay, the word lady's finger might mean different in European countries. The word brinjal doesn't have any meaning in the European countries. Okay, the word passing out of college, it entirely means different in American countries or European countries. You have to understand the differences in this when we speak about this culture difference. Okay, culture difference or language barriers. I gave the example of brinjal and lady's finger because we are speaking English. So English speaking countries have certain different contextual differences. Okay, so that is what passing out of college is different when we speak about India. Okay, so in the context of college, it is graduating, right? Passing out of college. So that is use of passing out, that is a word passing out in the context of graduation, or in the context of um, college, it means graduation. But in a context of a hospital, the person has passed out. That means what? That means a person has fallen unconscious, right? So the same word passing out means different in different context. That is present in India, that is present in India and also other Asian countries. But the word passing out means only losing their consciousness or falling unconscious in the European or American countries, where it is a low context country or low context culture, where one word has only one kind of meaning. Okay, or minimal kind of meaning. That is, I hope it is understood. Next, coming to the group communication. Group communication is actually what? Communicating to a group or group of people or members of a group, right? It can range from a small team of one or two people, or not one or two, small group of three or four or five, to large organization. Okay, working environment, it can be in between a group of small group of people, or it can be in a larger organization. So here, effective group communication will help in what? Will help in collaboration. Okay, effective group communication will help in collaboration. It helps in decision making. Okay, decision making, and also to achieve goals. Okay, that is importance of effective group communication. But here we have three elements, that is role clarity. We have to have proper clarity about what person is doing what role. For example, in a cooking context, group cooking context, or group cooking context, one person is given the job to cut vegetables, one person is given the job to cut meat, or one person is given the job to clean the utensils. So each member has their own roles and responsibilities that has to be understood in the beginning itself. In a workplace situation, for example, we are organizing a cultural program in our college. That means what? There will be committees divided. These committees will have members. One member will be for cultural committee. They will be involved in the cultural programs. The other person will be the treasurer. That means they control the money. Okay, input and output of the money. So that will prevent, if the roles are clear, that will prevent overlap. that will prevent confusion and prevent conflict in later stages of group activity. Fine. So roles have to be clearer initially itself. Then active listening means all the members have to listen to each other actively. Okay, we have, if for a group to work properly, every person has to be engaging in a conversation, or we have to listen to others. And also, not only listening, we also have to respond properly. Okay, if we have certain opinions, we have to put forth. We can't just keep it inside, and later on it might create other conflicts. So this thing will ensure there is a collaboration, proper collaboration, and um, collaboration where everyone's input is valued in the group. Okay, that will create a certain respect for each other. Okay, that is called as active listening, where the person is listening and also giving their feedback. Fine. Next is conflict resolution. Obviously, if it is a project or group program, there will be differences of opinion. One person will say we have to make yeah, in case of cultural programs, one person might say we will go for western song, the other might other person might be more interested in doing a eastern song. So similarly, differences in opinion might be there, but it is how we come out of it, if how we solve these conflicts, that is how the group's effectiveness is understood. Okay, so finally it might be one person is wanting to do a western program, the other person is wanting to do an eastern program. So finally the group can decide to come together and do a mashup, or yeah, do a mashup of both, the fusion of both western and eastern combination of music, right? So similarly, those conflict has to be resolved easily. Okay, so if the roles are clear, if the group actively listens, then conflicts can be resolved easily. Okay, so every person has to contribute something. Okay, otherwise the group won't work, obviously. So that is why roles have to be clear in the beginning. All those things will help in collaboration, achieving the goals by proper decision making. Fine. Next, moving on to classroom communication. Okay, classroom communication will be the last portion of this session. So classroom communication means what? Exchange between teachers and students within the education environment. So teacher and student, so the communication between them, it should be a dynamic process. Okay, so there should be a verbal instruction. Teacher gives verbal instruction. Teacher might say, might tell the instructions, or there might be non-verbal cues. The feedback has to be there, interactive dialogue has to be there to make the classroom communication effective. Okay, so effective classroom communication will lead to what? Will lead to enhance the learning of students, it will enhance the learning, it will increase the student engagement. Okay, student engagement will be more, and also it creates a positive learning environment. Okay, it will create a positive learning environment if, only if, the classroom communication is effective. That is done via the student teacher interaction. See, if the teacher is not having clear concepts in their head or in their mind to communicate with the students, the interaction will be dull. Okay, and it can even turn monotonous, so student teacher interaction will be reduced. So we have to find out a way the teacher can communicate properly with the students in a way it can significantly impact the learning by providing motivation, right? So from the childhood itself, we all have been seeing teachers who might be boring. Some teachers will be excellent. Remember those teachers who were excellent? They always used to have proper rapport with the students. They used to keep us engaged in certain activities or engaged in the learning. Okay, that is done via positive reinforcement. Okay, positive reinforce. If the student is answering certain questions, we can positively reinforce, we can encourage the student to tell more, or we can applaud for them in the class. Okay, thereby we are giving a positive reinforcement so that the other students get encouraged, and also this student keep on performing great. Okay, giving positive reinforcement, giving clear instructions. Okay, giving clear instructions. Okay, and also by constructive feedback. Okay, constructive feedback from students and also to the students. If the students are not doing properly, we can give constructive feedback to the students so that they will be learning properly. And remember, while giving feedback, there should not be always criticism. Even though criticism is there, it should be constructive. It should not be completely accusing. The accusatory tone should not be there. Fine. Next is student participation. Always and always we have to encourage the students to ask questions. If they have certain ideas, they can share it with us. This teacher should be open to certain discussions so that it will promote active learning, okay, in the classroom. So that was about student participation, which is very much important in the effective classroom communication. Okay, the students should be made comfortable enough so that they can easily participate in the activity in the classes. Then finally, the most important point in the classroom communication is feedback. Okay, we have to provide timely and constructive feedback, which is essential in what it will be essential in guiding the students. Okay, guiding the students in their learning process. So remember, the feedback should be always constructive, and by constructive I mean it should be specific. Okay, it should be specific, it should be actionable. Okay, simply telling the student that they're bad, it doesn't do any good to the student. We can tell the students where they have to improve. Okay, it should be actionable. The student should be able to do something to correct their mistakes, right? Next is aimed. Okay, it should be aimed at what? Aimed at helping the students grow. Aimed at the growth of the students. Always remember, the growth of the students is the major aim of the teacher, right? So that is done via this constructive feedback. Fine. So that was about this effective communication and different forms of communication. Next, we will be learning about the barriers of effective communication in the next class. Okay, with this we finish the major forms of communication and also the elements of these various forms of communication. Remember, effective communication, everything had its own elements. For example, we had clarity, tone, pacing, and everything in the verbal communication. Classroom, we have the student teacher interaction and participation and feedback, and so on. Okay, so with this we find up for today with this video, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And also there's a playlist made for the NTT classes. Make sure to go and see the playlist, and you will be able to see the videos chronologically, and that will be helpful for you to create a flow. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a nice day.